In this video, we will be solving Part A. You will be doing Part B by yourself. Let's read the directions together. Directions. Solve the multi-part problem below using the writer strategy. Let's take a look at the writer strategy. The acronym WRITER helps us solve word problems, often that have multiple parts. These steps help guide our thinking so that we can identify the strategies that we will use our models efficiently, then evaluate, is our answer reasonable? We always begin by R, read and annotating the question. So let's begin. R, read and annotate. Part A. The manager of the pastry factory earns $38 an hour. This is double what a pastry baker earns. How much does a pastry baker earn during an 8-hour shift? Now that we have read the question, it's time to annotate. Annotate means make notes and write on. We're going to be using the tools in this purple box to annotate. You have the boxes to box or circle important information. You have red and blue to underline, and yellow and green to highlight. You can click on any of these and drag them to the location that you want them. Let's reread the question and stop at the punctuation. The manager of the pastry factory earns $38 an hour. There's a comma, we're going to stop. Is there anything so far in this sentence that we need to remember? Yes, we need to remember that the manager makes $38 an hour. So I'm going to select one of the boxes and drag it over to earns $38 an hour. And I'm actually going to put a box around manager also in the same color because the manager makes $38 an hour. If I was writing this on a piece of paper, I would probably draw an arrow from manager to $38 an hour. Let's continue reading. This is double what a pastry baker earns. Is there anything that we need to know in that part of the sentence? Yeah, the word double is really important. So I'm going to drag and put a circle around double what the pastry, and then I'm going to drag another one over to baker earns. As always, we need to underline our question. How much does a pastry baker earn during an 8-hour shift? And there seems to be something else really important in that sentence, which I'm going to highlight. Yeah, not just a pastry baker, but we need to know during an 8-hour shift, because the rest of the problem was just talking about in an hour. So we now have two parts here. We need to find out how much the pastry baker earns in an hour, and then how much the pastry baker earns in a shift, which a shift is 8 hours. So let's write down in I, identify strategy, our important information. We know that the manager earns $38 an hour. So we will write that under identify strategy. What else do we know? We know that $38 an hour, this is double what a pastry baker earns. So let's write that down. $38 is double. How would we write double? 2 times what the baker earns. Now let's finish reading the last sentence, the question. How much does a pastry baker earn during an 8-hour shift? So this is how much the baker would earn in 1 hour. So let's write this would be 1 hour. But a shift is 8 hours. So our second part of the problem would be that 8 hours we would need to figure out how much does the baker earn in 8 hours. So we would take how much the baker earns in 1 hour, and would we add 8 hours to it? No. Would we subtract 8 hours to it? Would we take 8 hours minus however much the baker made? No. 8 hours times how much the baker made? Yeah, we would, because the baker is making the same amount for 8 hours. That would give us how much the baker earns during one shift. And it's important to note that this is going to be money. This is how much money the baker makes in 1 hour. So all of these refer to dollar amounts. Next, I would like to work on the equations that represent this situation, because we started to make some nice almost equations here. The first thing that we have to do is we have to know that the manager earns $38 an hour, and that is double what the pastry baker earns. So the manager makes more than the baker. So if we write 38 equals 2 times the baker, will that tell us how much B is? No, it won't. So we actually need to rearrange this so we can figure out what will B equal. Well, if we have one of our factors missing of 38, we can always use the inverse division to figure out what this B will represent. So let's do 38 divided by 2, which is the inverse, and that will give us how much the baker makes, because the baker makes half of what the manager makes. Now, we have to take B, our answer here. That's how much the baker makes in 1 hour. How much does the baker make during an 8-hour shift? Well, a shift that is 8 hours means that the baker gets paid for 8 hours. So we know that we have to multiply times 8 hours. And then this will be an amount of money that the baker earns. So I'm going to call it M for money. Good. Now we're going to go back and explain our rationale for choosing the operations that we did. So the first thing that we chose to do was we said double. What does double mean? Double means twice as much. So because we knew the manager makes twice as much as the pastry baker, we decided to divide by 2. So I chose to divide by 2 because the pastry baker makes half what the manager makes. Now let's talk about why we multiplied. So then we multiplied times 8 hours. Why? Well, in the question it says that it is an 8-hour shift. Next, I chose to multiply by 8 because now I want you to finish the sentence. Why did we multiply by 8? What in the problem told us that we needed to multiply by 8? Pause the video so that you can write this down on your paper. Does my equation represent the problem? So let's check back. Does the equations that we came up with represent the problem? The manager earns $38 an hour. Yes. This is double times 2, what a pastry baker earns. Good. We switched that around so that we could find out how much the baker earns. How much does a pastry baker earn during an 8-hour shift? We have how much the baker earns in 1 hour times 8 hours, which equals how much money they made. So yes, my equation does represent this problem. Great, now it's time for D, draw a model. If you're not sure what 38 divided by 2 is, then I suggest that you skip count by 2's until you get to 38. Or you can use another division strategy. Then we're going to multiply this number times 8. So we have this number times 8 hours. You can use any multiplication strategy that you would like to find this answer. Go ahead and use your strategy and solve it on your paper. Pause the video while you do this. Now we're going to solve the equation. Since you used variables over here, the letters, we're now going to solve the equation using just numbers. You will write the quotient for 38 divided by 2 here. Then you will write the quotient to our problem times 8 hours equals how much money the pastry baker made. Pause the video if you need more time to do that. Now we will evaluate. Is my answer reasonable? So our answer here, is it reasonable that this is how much money the pastry baker earns during an 8-hour shift? So we will be beginning with this sentence stem. My answer is reasonable because. Why do you think this is a reasonable answer? You could talk about, is it larger than how much the baker made in 1 hour? Why is it larger? Okay, so go ahead and take some time and write why you think your answer is reasonable. Pause the video while you do that. Now we're going to R, respond. Answer the question and explain your thinking if the problem asks. So, the question is, how much does a pastry baker earn during an 8-hour shift? You are going to respond, a pastry baker earns, during an 8-hour shift. Go ahead and write your answer down. Pause the video while you do this. So now that you have this whole page finished and written on your paper, you can go to the next slide and type in your answers and annotate the question. The slide following where you type in your answers is marked as independent. This is part B. You will do this part independently. Because this problem asks, how much more does the manager earn than the pastry baker, you're going to need to get those amounts that they each made from part A. Okay, and this is just talking about one shift. So in the other problem, it told us how much they made each hour. You need to figure out how much they make in one shift and the difference. How much more does the manager make than the pastry baker? Hope that's helpful. Keep up the great work.